DreAllDay.com.
You are now tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative. That is the go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And then we put all this together into a series of frameworks, approaches, insights, strategies, and techniques, all underneath the umbrella of one unifying philosophy that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic, we're going to talk going from principles to strategies to tactics. And before we get into that, first of all, let me tell everybody I have a daily motivation text that I send out every single day for free to everyone who's in my text community. All you got to do to get it is text me at my number. Here's my number, 305-384-6894. Every day when I send that text out, you will be on the receiving end if you text me at my number so that you can be in my text community. And wherever you're listening to this, make sure you are subscribing to the show, liking the show, sharing the show, and leaving a rating of the show. All that stuff helps push us up in the algorithm so other people can work on their game and more people can know about the magic that we are making over here at Work on Your Game with you on a day-to-day basis. So this topic of principles and strategies and tactics, this is the order of operations that many people don't, they operate as if they do not understand it. I don't know if they for sure don't understand it, but they operate as if they don't understand it. Yet, you must follow, and is the reason why working hard with positive intentions can still fail miserably when you do not understand the order of operations. That's why this is so important. So I don't even have to give too much background on this. These three things I'm going to explain so you know exactly what they are and why they go in the order that they go in. Something that, if you've listened to me a few times, you may notice that I often point out that it's not that people are doing necessarily the quote-unquote wrong thing. It's just people do things in the wrong order, or they do things for the wrong reason, or you might be doing the right thing in the wrong space or the wrong thing at the right time. So it's when we get the things in the right order, what order of operations do we do things in, and understanding why. That's why my focus here at Work on Your Game is really on the strategies. It's not on the information and the knowledge, because listen, information and knowledge are freely all over the internet. I've shared a ton of it here on this show alone. It's not information and knowledge that you are missing. It's the strategy to how to apply your information and knowledge, and applying it in the right order so that you get the outcome that you want. It's kind of like baking a cake or following a recipe to make anything. Is if you do things out of order, you could have followed every step, but if you follow the steps in the wrong order, you're still not going to get the outcome that you want. So that's what we're talking about here today. Principles to strategies to techniques is a topic. Let's go to point number one. Topic again, principles to strategies to techniques. First of all, what is a principle? This is principle with an L-E on the end, not principle with an A-L on the end. The way I always remembered it is a principal is your pal, P-A-L. That's the principal, like the person in charge at school. Principle, this is the one with the L-E. That is defined as, quote, a fundamental truth or proposition that serves as the foundation for a system of belief or behavior, or for a chain of reasoning. It's a pretty long definition. Let me say it one more time. And I want to make this into more plain language. Principle is, this is my definition here, my version of this definition, is a fundamental truth or proposition that is the foundational piece of what we are doing. So principles are just the fundamental truths. We're building everything on these truths. If you build things on a lie, for example, to juxtapose building on a truth, then everything can come tumbling down because your foundation is a lie. But if you're building on principles, which you believe to be truths, then it doesn't matter who goes against it, because those principles stand strong. This is why somebody say, I'm a person of principle, I'm a man of principle, I'm a woman of principle. Our company is built on solid foundational principles. That means we are built on solid rock and nothing's going to knock this down. That's what principles mean. So having principles of your big picture, your overall understandings of what you are doing, why you are doing things, and the principles actually will act as, let's just call it the governing body, so to speak, for how you do things. That's what principles are about. One of the principles of what I do is the entire Work on Your Game philosophy, which is based around what? I mean, you hear it every single day. Discipline, confidence, mental toughness, personal initiative, which are about showing up every day, doing the work, putting yourself out there, continuing to show up, putting yourself out there even when things aren't working the way that you want them to work, and being a go-getter and going and putting things into action instead of sitting around and hoping that the action finds its way to you. Those are foundational principles of what I'm about, as the foundational principles of what Work on Your Game is about, and hopefully you have made them what you're about if you've been listening to the show often enough. So principles are your governing body. They are the foundation. They're what you come back to if things start to go haywire and everything's getting out of control. You need to kind of get back to home base. You need to get back to your North Star and kind of get back to where you know everything is how it's supposed to be. This is where you go back to your principles. Everything that you do is based on your principles. Some people may call these your fundamentals. Some people may call them your personal values. Where I'm from, some people might call it your home training. Just basically the way you were raised, the way you were taught, the way that you learned, the way that you think, what you believe, what you will accept, what you will not accept, what you stand for, what you don't stand for. These are all different versions of what we're talking about here today, which are your principles. Everything you do is based on these principles. So in this sense, these words are all meaning the same thing in this context. So when you have firm principles in place, at least what you believe to be firm principles, it is much easier to decide on and employ a strategy. It's much easier to pick a plan of action when you know what your principles are. The challenge for many people in choosing a strategy, or even coming up with a strategy, or even understanding the need for a strategy, is that they don't have any principles in place. Since you don't have principles in place, it's really hard to decide what direction to take and where to go, and which road to go on. I mean, there are a lot of different roads that you can choose from, right? In life, I'm talking about in all of life, whether we're talking in business, in relationships, and the way that you operate personally when it comes to your health and fitness, your finances, your relationships, your friends, your work, your career, and everything that you do. There are so many different roads that you can take. The number one question you got to ask yourself at the very beginning is, what are my principles? When you know what your principles are, it does two things. First of all, it eliminates a whole lot of options, a lot of things that you just won't do, and it makes it easy for you to narrow down what are the things that are actually possibilities for you, because they are the things that fit within the range of your principles. Because there are things that don't fit within the range of your principles, you're probably not going to do them. So for example, when it comes to my personal principles, one of my principles is that I stay in shape. I stay in good physical health, which means I need to go to the gym. I need to move my body. I need to exercise and work out. There's only so long that I can go without exercising. Even if I'm on a vacation or away, I'm going to find a way to get a workout in and do something to get my body moving, because one of my principles is that I stay in shape. So it makes it easy for me to make a decision. Even if I'm traveling somewhere, am I just going to sleep in and do nothing every day while I'm there? The answer is absolutely not, because it goes against my principles. So you need to decide and understand what your principles are. You need to have these in place, and you need to know exactly what they are in such a way that you can actually recite them out loud to yourself. Excuse me. This is something that I have espoused to you several times here on the show on different subjects. You need to know exactly what your things are, the things that you do, the things that you don't do, what you're about. You need to know what they are in such a way that you can communicate them clearly to yourself, let alone communicate them to anybody else. When you have firm principles in place, it's easy to decide on and employ a strategy. One principle that I've shared here that you hear me say over and over again, there's a bunch of them, but one of them is the same things the same way every time. That's another one of my personal principles. Another one is early is on time is late, and late is forgotten. Another one is time is your most valuable resource. Another, you're in the business of marketing your stuff, not in the business of doing your stuff. These are all things you've heard me say over and over again. And understand, principles don't have to be something that you just made up. It doesn't have to be some unique slogan that you came up with. Work on your game is a slogan, it's a phrase, it's a name of a brand and name of a business, but it's not a principle itself. The principles are these things that I just laid out, and there are others that I have, and you can have many others for yourself. The more firm and the more clear your principles are to you, the much easier it will be for you to make decisions about the strategies that you take and decisions about what to do and what not to do. One of the benefits of having firm principles in place that you're clear on is that it eliminates the paradox of choice. For those of you who don't know what that is, the paradox of choice is when you're in a situation where you have multiple choices, and because you can't quite figure out which option to take, it slows you down. You actually end up slowing yourself down, and you get what they call paralysis by analysis, because you're analyzing and trying to figure out, well, which one do I do? And you end up paralyzing yourself because you're trying to figure out which one to do next. It's like the story of the donkey who's dying of hunger and thirst at the same time. So he sees water 10 feet to his right, food 10 feet to his left. Which one does he go to first? The answer is neither one. He dies trying to decide which one to go to first. He should have went to the water. But anyway, you need these firm principles for everything you do in life, because it makes decision making smooth. And you need these in your business, your personal life, your fitness, your relationships, everything in between. When you are devoid of principles, any of you has ever come across a person who just seemed to have no principles, no fundamentals, no groundwork, no basis, no home training? Any of you ever come across a person like that? I think we all have. When you are devoid of principles, it becomes very hard to make decisions, and basically anything you do could work or not work, because what are you basing it on? You're basing it on nothing. Any of you come across a person who was like that, they would just say they were just living life randomly, just doing whatever happened to work for them at that moment. Probably doesn't work in the long term. So you want to make sure you're not that person. Point number 2. Today's topic, once again, is principles, then strategies, then tactics. Number 2, let's talk about strategy. We've talked about this a few times here on the show already. Strategy is a plan of action or policy designed to achieve a major or overall aim. Strategies are subservient to principles. When you're clear on your principles, you build your strategies on top of them. The more firm your principles, the easier it is to draw up and deploy a strategy. A simple way to look at strategies is as merely a way to execute on your principles. When you're clear what your strategies are, then all you're doing is executing your principles. It's basically a plan to push through with your principles. So if one of my principles is, as I said, the same things the same way every time, then I'm going to come up with processes that I can follow over and over again, because one of my principles is the same things the same way every time. So my strategies are going to reflect that. So for example, if one of your principles is that early is on time, and on time is late, and late is forgotten, then you will craft a strategy that makes you early for everything that you do. Why? Because being early is you merely following your own principles. Not because it's going to be fun, not because you're going to get recognition for it, not because you need to preach it to anybody else, but your principle is being early. And early is a good thing for you, so you're going to find a way to be early as often as you possibly can. So you can see just from that example how principles make strategizing much easier. It's easy to strategize when you have principles in place. You don't have to figure out too many things when you have all the principles in place already. All you need to do is craft a strategy that merely executes on the principles that you already have. So this is what strategy is about. And we talked about strategy in a few episodes here. Let me give you a couple of those episode numbers so you can go and cross-reference them. I told you episode 2045, why you need to master strategy. Episode number 1850, strategies to cut through fat and get attention. Episode 1835, marketing strategies. Episode number 1770, new strategies to stay in the moments and have impact. Episode number 1648, the power of strategy. Episode number, I got so many of them here, I'm trying to pick ones that'll work for you. Episode 1526, how to strategize properly. And by the way, you want to check any episode in the history of the Work on Your Game masterclasses, go to workonyourgamepodcast.com. That link is down below in the show notes. Again, it is workonyourgamepodcast.com. That's where you can see a list of every episode in the history of the show. So that's strategy. Let's move on to point number 3, which is tactics. Today's topic, once again, is principles, then strategies, then tactics. A tactic is the art or skill of employing available means to accomplish an end. That's what a tactic is. Employing whatever is available to get something done. Tactics are the part that most people are familiar with, even though you might not call them tactics. Tactics are the actual actions that you do in the moment when things need to be done. That's what a tactic is. All right, something needs to be done. All right, these are the things that we're going to do to get that thing done. Tactics are used to execute on strategies. And here's the thing about tactics. They are interchangeable, meaning you can swap in or out a tactic as necessary given the situation at hand. You have to understand that tactics are at the bottom of the totem pole of what we're discussing here today, even though many people treat tactics as if they're at the top of the totem pole. That's why the crux of why we're talking about this here today. Many people start with tactics. In other words, many people look at and see what someone is doing, or they see something that got done and it may have worked. It may have produced, quote unquote, worked. It produced a desirable outcome for someone else or for a company, or maybe even for themselves. And then they just want to repeat that same tactic over and over and over again with no underlying strategy for why they're using the tactic, and no underlying principle no underlying principle that governs the strategy, and no strategy to govern the tactics. So they're just randomly doing different tactics over, and either doing random tactics over and over again, or just doing a whole bunch of different random tactics haphazardly and hoping that something works out, and then getting frustrated when it doesn't work out. Have I described anybody's situation? Some of you do this with your business. Some of you are doing this with your health. Some of you are doing this when it comes to spreading the word about your brand, or about your name, or about whatever it is that you do. Some of you are doing this with, some of you want to write a book, or you want to start a podcast, you want to start a YouTube channel, and you're using all these random tactics, but you don't have any strategies in place. You don't have any underlying principles. So all your tactics are random. You're getting random results, and it's frustrating you because your results are not consistent because you are not consistent. When everything you're doing is governed by tactics, you're going to get inconsistency. You're going to get randomness. You're going to get chaos. Why? Because you don't have anything governing your actions. You need something governing your actions. Tactics are just actions. You need strategy governing the tactics, and principles governing the strategy. So tactics are the actual actions, but many people start down here with the actions. A tactic that I use, for example, is, I format every episode of the show. Point number one, number two, number three. Strategy is I put out material every single day, using this masterclass as my main vehicle. If I had to pick one, I would stick with this masterclass. The principle is that anybody who's in thought leadership needs to be prolific in publishing. That doesn't mean that you need to put out an episode every day. Again, your strategy can change, but you do need to be prolific, meaning you need to be consistent, and you need to be out there enough that if someone went looking around for whatever it is that you talk about, they should come across you at some point. A tactic might be posting all the time on social media. But if you don't have a strategy or principles that are governing the tactic of posting all the time on social media, why are you posting all the time on social media? Because you heard somebody say it, you saw somebody doing it, you see other people posting all the time on social media, so you decided, all right, I'm gonna just post all the time on social media. But you don't have a strategy that is governing that tactic. So you're just doing random stuff, and then when it doesn't work, or even if it does work, when it stops working, because eventually any tactic is going to become old and it's not going to work anymore, now you're right back to the drawing board in the same spot trying to figure out what to do. But if you have, so another tactic is, for example, a basketball player doing certain drills on the court. So when I played ball, I would be in the gym sometimes working on my game by myself. And I had a strategy for how I worked on my game every day. I knew exactly what I was doing before I got to the gym. And sometimes I'd be on the court practicing on one basket. There'd be somebody on the other basket on the other end of the court. And I could tell they were watching me, and then they'd be kind of like copying the stuff that I was doing. The difference between me and them is that I had a strategy for what I was doing. It was a reason why I was doing certain drills. They didn't have a reason. They were just running around the court, just trying to figure out what to do. They didn't have a rhyme or a reason. They had no plan to what they were doing, which is probably why they had no game at the exact same time. It's the same thing for you, and this can apply to any area of life. It doesn't have to be basketball. If you're not getting consistent results, or you don't have consistent game at what you're doing, is because you're probably doing a whole bunch of random actions with no underlying strategy and no governing principles. If you don't have a strategy for the actions, no governing principle for the strategy, you could do all kinds of actions every day and you will not achieve a specific outcome. You may not achieve any outcome whatsoever, even though you're doing all the stuff, whatever all the stuff happens to be for you. That's why you need to understand the hierarchy of these three, and you need to understand how to actually put them to use. I'll tell you how to do that in a minute. Let's recap today's class, which is principles, the strategies, the tactics. This is an order of operations that everybody needs to follow, but many people do not. Point number one, principle is a fundamental truth or proposition that serves as a foundational piece for a belief or behavior or a chain of reasoning. It's basically your big picture understanding of what you do, why you do it, and how you do things. When you have firm principles in place, it's easy to make decisions, it's easy to employ strategies. So some of the principles you heard me talk about on this show, same things the same way every time. Early is on time is late, late is forgotten. Time is your most valuable resource. You're in the business of marketing your stuff, not in the business of doing your stuff. The more firm and clear you are on principles, the easier it is to make decisions, the easier it is to cut things out that simply don't fit. Point number 2 is a strategy. It's a plan of action or policy designed to achieve a major or overall aim. Strategies are subservient to principles. The more firm the principles, the easier it is to draw up and deploy your strategies. Simple way to look at strategies is just a way to execute your own principles. So whatever principles you have, you craft strategies that allow you to put those principles to work and make them into an actual plan of action. All you got to do is craft a strategy that executes on what you already believe. And number 3, the tactics are the actions. This is the skill of employing whatever available means to accomplish an end. In other words, the actions that you take. We all need to take action at some point. And I have an episode called How to Have an Action Bias. That was episode 1199. Having an action bias is a good idea. Challenge of many people is that they start with random actions before they figure out what their strategy is and before they even know what their principles are, if they even have any principles in the first place. This is the biggest mistake that a lot of people make. So this is why, yes, you should have tactics, you should take actions, but you need to work backwards here. First of all, figure out your principles, your underlying principles, then the strategies. Then you figure out what actions to take, because tactics are interchangeable. There are a million billion different tactics that you can take with anything that you do. So you don't want to jump straight into tactics because you can get lost in that sauce. It's kind of like scrolling through a social media feed. It never ends. You keep scrolling, it'll just keep going. That's the same number of posts you can find if you just scroll through a Facebook or a Twitter or a Instagram, is the same number of tactics that you could possibly use if you don't have a strategy or principles keeping those tactics in check and kicking some of them out and bringing some of them in. So all that said, a couple things for you here. Number 1, get my daily motivation text for free every single day by texting me on my number 305-384-6894. Number 2, make sure you are subscribed to me and to the show wherever you are listening to this. If you're on audio apps, make sure you hit that subscribe button and leave me a rating so that we can move up in the rankings of the podcast apps. And number 3, go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. That's where you can work with me, and we will figure out, first of all, we need the underlying principles in place, then the strategies for what we're going to do, then we'll figure out the actions and the tactics for you achieving your major overall aims. That is in my one-on-one coaching third day mastermind, my group coaching bulletproof mastermind, and you get access to all my courses you can work on, self-learning on the back end. That's all at workonyourgameuniversity.com. Work on your game. Dre all day.